Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I am your host, Jordan Jones. It's been a very busy week in the world of Purdue athletics since last Tuesday's episode. We've had more positive news regarding football season being played on time, lots of Purdue football recruiting news, controversy elsewhere in the Big Ten West, but unfortunately we begin this episode with some sad news from yesterday. Former Purdue athletic director Morgan Burke passed away yesterday at the age of 68. Burke was a 1973 Purdue graduate. 20 years later, he returned to West Lafayette in the fall of 1993 to take over as athletic director. Over the next 23 years, up until 2017, he served in that role, most notably hiring both Joe Tiller and Matt Painter to their positions as football and men's basketball coach. He oversaw the women's basketball rise to prominence, including the 1999 national championship. He took a lot of heat, obviously, and I think it's unfortunate that Burke passed away as soon as he did, because I think really the time after he stepped down as athletic director and was replaced by Mike Babinski, I think his legacy was becoming more remembering the good things he did and how much he cared about Purdue, and less some of the reasons why people were tired of Burke as an athletic director by the end, and some of the not as strong hires he made towards the end. I wish that there was more time for those memories to fade and for the positive things that Burke did for Purdue to be remembered. One notable thing is the athletic complex out on Cherry Lane, northwest of campus, where baseball, softball, and soccer all play their games. That was all Burke. That was all done under Burke's tenure, and he was really a guy who cared greatly about all Purdue sports and valued even the non-revenue sports as much as any athletic director in America values their school's non-revenue sports. Really a true Purdue guy through and through. It's sad. Obviously, 68 is very, very young to pass away these days. My condolences go out to his wife, Kate, and the rest of the Burke family. Really, really sad day for Purdue athletics. Just a tough day. Now, elsewhere in Purdue news, last week was a really busy week, especially for Purdue football. The 2021 quarterback recruiting cycle looks like it is complete. Purdue, on Wednesday evening last week, landed a 3-star athlete from Naperville Central High School in Illinois, Sam Jackson, who will be playing quarterback at Purdue. This was a little bit of a surprise move. Jackson was committed to Minnesota, had committed there twice, decommitted after the first time, and then recommitted to PJ Fleck and the Gophers before decommitting on Wednesday and in the same tweet committing to Purdue. Obviously, that's not something that was tremendously expected, but nonetheless, a pretty good ad for Purdue. At the same time, Purdue was very invested in 4-star quarterback from Lawrence North High School in Indianapolis, Donovan McCulley. Really highly rated player, an early favorite to win Indiana's Mr. Football here in the fall. And just hours later, after Jackson's commitment to Purdue, McCulley announced that he's going to Bloomington and will play for the Indiana Hoosiers. Obviously, that's not a move that Purdue fans are too happy about, and that is a move, I don't remember who it was, but someone on Twitter in the Purdue Twitter world noted, this is going to be something that Purdue and IU fans are talking about for the next 4 or 5 years, and I don't think they could be more right. That's big. It's not often that we get star quarterbacks in Indiana. And it's really not often that they stay in state. You look back to Brandon Peters and Hunter Johnson. Well, neither of those guys really turned out. I know Peters has seen some success at Illinois after transferring there from Michigan, and Hunter Johnson had a really, really tough year at Northwestern after coming back from Clemson. But you don't see too often these guys from Indianapolis who are real highly rated players staying home and going to one of the 2 state schools in the Big Ten. Really cool to see those guys staying home. Obviously, McCauley going to Indiana will be pretty unpopular among Purdue fans. The Indiana people like to keep players home, and that's not something Purdue is able to do. But, in Jackson, Purdue gets a really good player. I've watched film on both Jackson and McCauley. Jackson's 5'11" and 170 pounds, according to his profile on 24/7 Sports. He's small. I get that. And as we've seen throughout football in the recent years, size is becoming less important at quarterback. I think it is still relevant, but, I think with the way football's been moving to a more spread out offense, to a more quarterback run-driven offense, Jackson fits the bill, and I think he really checks off the box of a mobile quarterback that Jeff Brom wants. I think you see last year when Purdue failed to even reach 1,000 rushing yards in the season, there's a need for a quarterback who can stretch the field with his legs. Jack Plummer, Aiden O'Connell are both really good quarterbacks, and I think both can do really good things for Purdue. Austin Burton was added because he can add that dual threat element. And you see now with the recruitment and commitment of Jackson, as well as McCauley's pursuit, Purdue wants to move in that direction of a more dual threat level quarterback to try to change the game a little bit. That's not something Purdue has really ever had in terms of a dual threat quarterback. I know we can go back to Rob Henry and Justin Siller a little bit in their brief stints as Purdue quarterbacks, but they weren't good either. Purdue's never had a good dual threat quarterback. Now, we're going to get into seeing that with the commitment of Jackson. In terms of comparing him to McCauley, they're hard to compare. Jackson really runs well. Jackson began his career as a wide receiver in high school, just switching to quarterback for his junior year. Throwing the ball, he's got a great arm. Throws the ball downfield really, really well. A lot of his highlights are downfield passes. He runs well. He is very quick to leave the pocket, and I think that comfort in the pocket is something that really needs to develop before he gets to West Lafayette. You can see it in the Big 12 where you have all the Oklahoma quarterbacks running wild out there. Big 10 defenses are a little bit better. Big 10 defenses are more physical. They're quicker. You're not able to run around in the Big 10 the way you are somewhere like the Big 12 or Pac-12. He's going to have to be comfortable in the pocket in order to succeed at Purdue. That's Jeff Brom's forte. That drop-back passing quarterback is where he's always had success. I think he's going to be able to work with Jackson and turn him into a good passer. I'm really, really optimistic about this commitment. Obviously, McCauley going to Indiana is a big loss. I was really high on this kid. 6'5", 195 pounds. He looks the part of an elite quarterback. He has that getting off the bus factor that you don't always see in guys. He runs well. He runs really well. He, in my opinion, looked a little bit better on short passes. I think he had a little bit more control over his short passes in the short passing game. Now, I think that's pretty important, but also, it's important to note that, not only do these guys have another year of high school left, it's not often that guys come in and start as a true freshman or even play as a true freshman in college. So you're looking at a couple of years before either Jackson at Purdue or McCauley at Indiana will even see the field. There's a lot of time for development for both of these guys. I didn't think McCauley's deep ball was quite as impressive as Jackson's, and I think Jackson is a little bit more explosive of a runner than McCauley, even if McCauley, is still very good running the football. I think Jackson's got that burst of speed that you don't quite see in McCulley. Again, McCulley's going to be a prime candidate for Indiana Mr. Football this year. As long as he plays well and Lawrence North has a strong year, I'd be really surprised to see it go to anyone else. And it's important to note, with this commitment, Indiana football is no joke these days. Tom Allen has done an incredible job on building on the success that Kevin Wilson had at Indiana. We're really to the point now where Indiana might be entering their best days in football history. I know we always, talk that the Bill Mallory days were good in Bloomington, and they were. You had Anthony Thompson, a Heisman candidate. You had some really good players in Bloomington. We're starting to see that now, and I think Indiana's to the point where they could exceed those Bill Mallory days, or at least continue the success for longer than Mallory did. Indiana needs to get that bowl win. I know they were close last year and really choked it away late in the game against Tennessee, but, Indiana's no pushover, and getting that high 4-star recruit from, really in their backyard in Indianapolis to stay in Indiana, that's pretty significant. Indiana's now to the point where this rivalry, the Old Oak and Bucket games, are going to be a lot of fun here in the future because, IU's strong. They're going to struggle to really show off their strength being in the Big Ten East because they're not going to be better than Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan. Those three programs are going to stay better than IU. I think we're close to IU beating one of those teams. They've been coming so close for so many years now to pulling off that big, big upset. I think at some point here in the next year, 2 years, you're going to see one of those top three teams in the Big Ten East go down. They have a great chance to make a statement week 1 this year up in Madison on Friday night against the Badgers. At some point, Indiana's going to make that statement and really take the next step into a football program. And, obviously Purdue's developing too. Jeff Brom has recruited at a high level at Purdue. Those Old Oak and Bucket games aren't going to be, the battle of 3 and 8 teams as we've seen in the past. I think, or even as we've seen in Brom's first 2 years, a battle of 5 and 6 teams looking to get to a bowl game. I think we're going to see some higher level games, teams above 500 competing to get into a better bowl is the Old Oak and Bucket matchup of the future here with Brom and Allen at the helm of those schools. Now, that wasn't all for Purdue recruiting last week. Friday, Purdue got really good news in that DJ Johnson, a transfer defensive back from Iowa, is coming to West Lafayette. He redshirted in his first season, the 2018 season at Iowa, and played in 11 games last year as a redshirt freshman. Started 5 of them, had 14 tackles and 2 pass breakups. He's a player out of North Central High School in Indianapolis. He was a 4-star recruit at the time, had offers from some real big programs, LSU and Notre Dame. Kind of stand out as the more notable programs that he had interest from. This is a really good get for Purdue. He's a 5'11", 185-pound defensive back. Can play some corner, can play some safety. Going to be a real versatile player for Purdue to use in that secondary that is really starting to look pretty talented coming into next year. With 3 off-season additions to that secondary, that's going to be a position of strength for Purdue. They're going to be real deep. They should be able to survive injuries back there. That's where Purdue's really been hurt the last couple years, as the injuries have mounted up on defense and they just can't overcome them. Now, obviously, Johnson is not a graduate transfer, but I think with everything that's gone on in Iowa City, with Kirk Ferentz, with Chris Doyle, and the insensitive culture, the borderline racist culture that has been discussed at Iowa and has really gone mainstream into the media. We'll get to more of that topic later. but this is a really strong indication that Johnson's going to get immediate eligibility at Purdue. We've seen players in the past, most notably Justin Fields, get immediate eligibility because of racial issues. You may remember Fields at Georgia claimed that he was slurred racially by other students at UGA and used that in his NCAA transfer waiver application to try to get immediate eligibility in Columbus, and successfully did so. I think especially with how outspoken DJ Johnson has been on Twitter since the development of Chris Doyle's insensitive language towards black players at Iowa, that outspokenness is really going to help him in his immediate eligibility process. And I don't do this often, but I am going to go ahead and assume that he will be eligible to play for Purdue this fall. Again, I don't often like to assume that because the NCAA method of granting immediate eligibility is a complete disaster and makes no sense most of the time. But I'd be absolutely shocked if Johnson was not granted immediate eligibility. Obviously, the racial insensitivity at Iowa, as well as he's transferring closer to home. He's from Indianapolis. There are 3 D1 schools within an hour and a half of Indianapolis in IU, Purdue, and Ball State. He chose one of those, coming to West Lafayette. And I really think this addition turns the secondary into Purdue's strongest defensive position group this offseason. The defensive line is going to be real strong, led by Lorenzo Neal and George Karlaftis, but Purdue's just got so much depth at DB now. You look at Corey Trice, who had a really good year last year. The addition of Johnson, Giovanni Howard is a good junior college corner that's coming in this year, and I think a lot of people expect to be a contributor to Purdue right away. You've got returners in Dedrick Mackey and Simeon Smiley. Mackey probably going to be locked in at corner. Smiley can go, a little bit back and forth between corner and safety and be a moving piece on the defensive backfield. You had Niles Beverly, a pretty well thought of redshirt freshman who, sat out last year but seemed to impress the coaches pretty well. Then you look at safety, and I'm real high on Cam Allen. He had a really good freshman year at safety for Purdue last year. Really exciting player. You add him with redshirt freshman Marvin Grant, who is a really highly thought of 4-star recruit out of Detroit. I haven't seen as many people talk about him as I think should be talking about him when it comes to Purdue's defense this year. He's a guy I think is going to be really good. And then, kind of lost in the mix, Purdue added a 5th-year graduate transfer in Tyler Coyle. He's a defensive back coming in from UConn. Obviously, UConn football has been awful for the last couple years now, but Coyle was the leading tackler for UConn. As Dan Dockich likes to say, even the worst teams have to have a leading scorer. But regardless, he's a good piece to add to a position group that could use as much depth as possible. And I think he's another guy who you can move between corner and safety a little bit and really get some good production from there. The depth at secondary is going to help the linebacker position group as well. With all of this depth, I think you're going to see sophomores Jalen Graham and Elijah Ball make that permanent transition to linebacker. They both had played some linebacker last year, but I think with Diaco wanting to move to a 3-4 defense, you're really going to need more linebackers. And Graham and Ball are guys who have some experience at linebacker. I think you're going to see them become full-time linebackers at Purdue now. But again, a really good week for Purdue recruiting. Sam Jackson's a really high-level player for Purdue, and DJ Johnson is going to be a difference maker from day one in the defensive backfield. Now, looking at Purdue recruiting, it's slowed down a little bit. Early on in the quarantine period, you had a lot of dominoes falling, players committing left and right. Purdue's up to 9 commits for the 2021 class. The biggest domino yet to fall obviously lies in Purdue's own backyard in 4-star linebacker Yanni Karlaftis from West Lafayette High School. He's announced his final 4 schools of Purdue, Wisconsin, Cal, and Oregon. I really do think Purdue's going to end up getting him. Obviously the connection with his brother being there, and George Karlaftis is a freshman All-American in his first year as a Boilermaker. That's going to help a lot, as well as the fact that, we're still not sure when in-person visits are going to be able to take place. Getting out to the West Coast to see Cal and Oregon for an official visit just doesn't seem as likely as it maybe it once did. I do believe, George Karlaftis enrolled early at Purdue. I would think Yanni may be considering the same avenue, especially after seeing the success George had as a freshman after enrolling early. So, I think maybe we could see that commitment bubble burst here pretty soon. And, I think Purdue obviously wants him very badly as a good piece to add to that linebacker group, as someone who could potentially play right away and contribute well right away. Now, this past week, Purdue AD Mike Babinski released another statement regarding football season, and this is something we're going to keep track of on the podcast. Obviously, I want to get into Ross-Ade Stadium. I know a lot of you guys, the listeners, want to get into Ross-Ade Stadium as well. So we're going to keep updating whatever Mike Babinski and the athletic department releases about fans in the stands, about what football season may look like. It sounds like at this point, season ticket holders and students are going to be the priority. Now, he did say that, we've seen, I want to say 23,000 season tickets sold. That includes about 6,000 student tickets that have been sold. I don't know what that's going to look like for how student tickets are going to be continued to be sold. The student section at Ross-Ade holds between 12 to 15,000 kids. If they're only at 6,000, you would think they're going to get a lot more season ticket packages sold for students. How many do you let come in before you cut that off? And with general public season ticket holders, I think the same thing is applicable. How long is it going to be until they reach that number where the athletic department and athletic ticket office elects to say, all right, we're done. We're not going to sell any more tickets. They did say there will be no single game tickets or any of the mini packages where you get 3 or 4 games. None of those are going to be sold for right now. We're only, a week or 2 away from Mitch Daniels saying he doesn't see capacity exceeding 25%. Now we've already seen that. I said from the start, I think that 25% was a lot more of a floor than it was a ceiling. And we're seeing that right away. Look, this is a money game. I know, the safety is important. The safety of people is important. Also, the financial state of Purdue athletics is really important to all of the people in that department. And let's not forget here, in Purdue athletics, only 2 sports operate in the black. That's football and men's basketball. And the revenue you make off of football and men's basketball, that needs to cover all the losses from your other sports. Season tickets and just ticket revenue, concession revenue, all of that at Purdue football games is a major part of how the athletic department gets funded. I think you're going to see as many people in Ross-Ade as the athletic department is comfortable with. I think at this point, it's only mid-June. We still have 3 months before Purdue takes the field in Ross-Ade, week 2 against Memphis. I'd be shocked if we're not at least at 50% capacity for that game, if not more. I really am optimistic about this. There's a lot of questions to be answered still. What does the game day atmosphere look like? What does tailgating look like? How are entrances done? With the student section, it's all general seating right now. How does that differ? There's so many questions to be answered. Bathrooms are going to be a big thing. Obviously, Ross-Ade Stadium's bathrooms are not big, and the lines never move too quickly. How that's going to change with all the people standing in line for concessions, for beer, for bathrooms. I don't know, but, right now I'm really optimistic that we're going to have at least 50% capacity in Ross-Ade in the fall. We did see, on another coronavirus-related topic, the football players all returned to campus last Monday. It sounds like every player elected to return, despite it being optional to return. And Mike Babinski did say there were no positive tests for the COVID-19 virus. Good news, again, obviously, that's subject to change. There is still, almost 3 months until football season. So it's going to be something that's monitored quite a bit. I know they plan on testing the student athletes quite a bit, but really, really good news that no players tested positive. And you hope that now we can get some more good work done towards getting a season going, getting the players back in shape, getting them lifting, and hopefully before much longer, getting back on the practice field to play some, get some snaps in, get some reps in, and really start to get, another step closer to football season. Last week, the NCAA did approve the recommendation that teams begin practicing 4 weeks before kickoff. That is normal. That is exactly what normally happens in a football season. The teams who play week 0 get to start a week earlier, but everyone else gets those 4 weeks of practice prior to the season. The NCAA approved that as a recommendation to all schools who are able to do that based on their state regulations at this point. More positive news, and right now I feel really comfortable that on September 5th, the Boilers are going to be in Lincoln, Nebraska, and football fans everywhere are going to have football from noon to the end of the Hawaii game at whatever time that gets over. Now, going elsewhere in the Big Ten West, Kirk Ferentz and the Iowa Hawkeyes have come into plenty of hot water recently in response to the racial tensions in America at this time. Friday, Kirk Ferentz was holding a press conference, and rumors were swirling on Twitter, what's going to go on here? Is he going to get fired? Is he going to resign? Is Chris Doyle going to be fired? What's going to go on here? And by this time, Chris Doyle had already been placed on administrative leave. Kirk Ferentz was pretty honest in his press conference. He admitted some fault, that he needed to be better. Basically just continuing to reiterate that he wants Iowa football to keep moving in the right direction. He did bring 3 players up with him. They all seem to be pretty supportive of Ferentz. A lot of good stuff coming from that. I am glad to see Kirk Ferentz staying at Iowa, remaining the head coach. A really good coach, a really good guy for college football. And, the continuity at that school has been unbelievably impressive, going from the legend Hayden Fry to Kirk Ferentz right away, and really just maintaining that strong program. I hope everything's able to get figured out at Iowa. That's a good school, good program in the Big Ten, and you never want to see any situation where student athletes are put in a really bad position. So, hopefully everything continues to work itself out at Iowa. That started yesterday when the university decided to part ways with former strength coach Chris Doyle, who again had been accused of using racially insensitive language and being very discriminatory against black players. This was recounted by dozens of former Iowa players on Twitter. He had been the strength coach during the entire tenure of Kirk Ferentz since 1999. It was real interesting. Brett McMurphy, college football insider, tweeted out that there was a $1.11 million buyout and full health benefits being provided to Doyle for the next 15 months. That's pretty hefty for the University of Iowa, but, it makes it very clear that Iowa administration wanted to get him out of there and start to move the football program back to a more positive direction without him. So it'll be interesting to follow Iowa, but it does seem that all signs indicate Kirk Ferentz will be on the sidelines this year when their season opens on September 5th as well. That's all we've got for the show today. I'd love to get some more basketball discussion on the show, but with the NBA draft withdrawal deadline being pushed back to August 3rd, we're still almost 2 months away from, full clarity for the 2021 season, as John Rothstein would say. As always, if you have anything you want me to hear to touch on during an episode, feel free to let me know, whether it be Purdue related, college sports related, or just anything really. Just let me know. The show's on Twitter. Make sure to give us a follow at Boilers Beyond. We keep you. We stay on top of all the biggest news around Purdue athletics and college sports in general, really. We'll be back here next week, same time, same place. We're available everywhere you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on our new content. Until next week, stay safe.